Okay, we're going to get started. My name is Adrian Ford. I want to take this opportunity to welcome all of you, and especially the Attorney General Scott Harshberger, to Three Pyramids and the Massachusetts Opportunity Council, and to Ward 5B and the City of Fitchburg. And on behalf of all of the neighborhood residents, I think my daughter sort of put it I picked her up this morning, taking her to school, and she said, you're going to have a big day, meetings or whatever. I said, yeah. I said, the Attorney General's coming in. She says, oh yes, Poppy. All the kids at school are talking about that. And I says, oh yeah? She says, how do they know about it? And I says, well, they probably heard about it on the radio. And so she said, well, they think that you're important because you're going to be with the Attorney General. And I thought, I didn't say anything. I was saying to myself, well, I think what we're doing is important. So she then said that they think you're important, the Attorney General thinks you're important, so I think you're important. So I just wanted to say that I think that you have not only inspired all of us by bringing the office of the Attorney General down into the neighborhood, but a lot of children too. And I think with regards to the Safe and Healthy Neighborhood Coalition, to a large extent, that's been our focus, especially when we're in a time when there's been a 47% increase in poverty in this country, and women and children are the highest poverty group. So I want to thank you for inspiring the children. Perhaps you can come back and we can just have a day with all youth, because they need these kinds of role models. So in having said that, I'd like to introduce the Honorable Mayor, Jeffrey Bean.
I'll make sure I do that for you. Again, it's my pleasure to welcome you here to the city of Fitchburg and welcome you to this neighborhood. And I'm glad to see that somebody has brought the coffee and donuts, so I don't have to go out and get them this morning, because as you know what happened to that. But it's great to have everybody here, and I would like to say that the Safe and Healthy Neighborhood Coalition has done a great job of pulling the city together and dealing with the violence and the disturbing things that are happening in our neighborhood. And all too often, what you have in cities and towns is people don't want to make aware of the problems that they have, aren't willing to admit that they have problems. And we here in Fitchburg, as a city, know that cities have problems and willing to admit it and willing to deal with it as a community. And I'm just so proud of the people that have been involved and have stuck with it. This just hasn't been a one-time issue that we had a meeting and that was it, but we've come together and dealt with it and continue to deal with it. And I just want to thank each and every one of you for keeping your commitment to the city and working with us. Very happy to see the Attorney General here today. This is not his first visit to the city of Fitchburg. He came here about last year, right after we had the issue with the high increase in gang-related crime. He saw how we were dealing with it. We pulled everybody together, worked close, and through those efforts, we were able to reduce gang-related crime by 50% last year, which I thought was tremendous. Again, I'm happy to have the Attorney General here. And what we'd like to do is have you folks who've been on the front lines, have been involved in it, kind of tell the Attorney General what's been happening, what improvements we've been seeing, and what you hope to be able to see in the future. So I think that's what we're going to be here today for. And I'd like to do is have the Attorney General come up and give a few brief remarks before we begin.
See, Scott? Very clever. He says, few brief. Thank you. These are just for you, Jeff. I'm throwing these remarks away. I was going to give here. It's nice to be here again. I think the first time we all met was over in City Hall, actually earlier this year, when you sort of gave me, with Carolyn's leadership, a sort of review of what you were doing at the Neighborhood Coalition. As you know, we immediately seized upon that and made you a statewide model. And you may know, I think you all know, that the representatives of this coalition made a presentation at our second annual Urban Violence Conference in June in Boston. And one of our focuses, as it had been for coming here, was to try to demonstrate to people around the state that there are communities and coalitions that are coming together to try to deal with the problem of violence at the root at the community, at the grassroots level, and trying to focus on it even with limited resources, and particularly because resources are limited, in a coordinated way. And it was really, to me, has given life to the meaning of community coalitions. And I mean, I don't mean to sugarcoat this so much to you, but I think that the mayor knows, and as we've gone around the state, being able to reference Fitchburg's coalition as one example of what a small city, which still has urban problems and has the typical problems of other cities, can do by pulling together, is very positive and very productive. I'm also pleased, and this is just a note that I'm on these days, here, that you get a lot of coverage locally by the media. And I say that not facetiously, because one of the biggest problems I've seen going around the state, aside from the fact that as a matter of fiscal policy at the federal and state level, we have yet to invest in a way that we should in our cities to deal with these problems, has been that the coverage, it's been very hard to get positive efforts covered. If there's a violence problem, if there's a gang problem, we get plenty of attention from the major media. They're there and they're focusing on what's the problem, you know, how is this happening? When people are trying to come together in a positive way to prevent it, to try to deal with it in the long term, that's not as newsworthy. And this isn't to blame the media for this, it's maybe our own attention spans. It's not a good 30-second soundbite to say, how are we dealing with violence prevention in Fitchburg? Well, we have a Safe and Healthy Neighborhood Coalition that meets periodically, that's dealing by talking with each other, and we're trying to work these things out day in and day out. And I think it's making a difference. I'm pleased that the mayor, and it would be successful even if it wasn't these statistics, but that you are beginning to see some effects from this that are concrete and measurable. So I am here to hear about where you are on the update, and at the end make my modest contribution to your efforts from our drug forfeiture funds, which we'll do just at the end to wrap this up. I do want to say the second thing, because you're talking about kids. I came today from a conference that we're having at at the Burlington campus of Northeastern University. 250 student peer mediators are there from 50 schools throughout Massachusetts, urban schools, suburban, rural schools from western Massachusetts, southeastern Massachusetts, and the major cities. These are representatives of the peer mediation programs that exist now in a number of schools around the state. As you know, we fund about 20 urban, junior, and senior high school conflict resolution programs through a variety of methods, but so we have those programs, and the interesting thing to me has been that the success rate for mediations in these schools has been almost 100%. And in certain urban schools in particular, the principals have made it very clear that the work of the student peer mediators, just by having the training, having them there, has really limited the incidence of violence. In fact, has almost reduced it to zero in many of these schools, and at the same time that the communities outside them have a lot of violence. But the point here was to give recognition to these kids who are doing the peer mediation, are doing the conflict resolution programs in their schools, give them a chance to talk to each other, and hopefully begin to get some recognition statewide, and have them understand that they really are contributing immensely to the solution of the problem of violence by preventing it before it occurs. And I've seen this now as a major crisis intervention tool, and it's very, very successful. My point, and I will stop, was this. We tried to get television coverage. There was none. This was not newsworthy. As the students say, of course, if one of us stabbed somebody here today, they'd be here immediately. If this was our high school, and this has been a frustration I know the superintendents and others have been expressing, and the kids have been expressing, in the urban schools in particular. You know, if somebody stabs somebody, even if it's not at a school, if it's at a subway stop and it's kids, people will talk about problems in the schools. But that's when they get the attention. But when you have these kids who day in and day out are absolutely preventing violence from occurring in their schools, and 95% of these kids are going to school without guns, without knives, without drugs, without alcohol, it's not getting a lot of attention. And I just think it's part of our responsibility. I have the opportunity to do it. The mayor does periodically to, as the chief law enforcement officer, to say this is the kind of program, these are the kinds of efforts that are making, in my view, a real difference and will make a difference over time. And that's why you're so important And I'm sorry for going on a bit longer here, but you have done an immense job here in Fitchburg, and I use it, and I hope it keeps working. That's what we're going to hear today. But let me tell you, I talk about this all over the state, and I just hope you can keep going because it's making, in my view, a tremendous difference in how we deal with these problems, and the hope for the future lies with you. Thank you very much for having me here.
The Attorney General is right in terms of his campaign, especially mentioning the mayor and the city of Fitchburg. I was in Brockton recently and talking to some city officials there, and they had acknowledged the fact that the Attorney General had mentioned Fitchburg as a model there. So
as long as they can beat you in football, they're happy.
Right. Mr. Attorney General, as you are well aware, democracy does not guarantee us success, but it does guarantee us an opportunity to participate. And I think what you will hear in the next half hour or so is that Fitchburg has seized that opportunity to engage all of its residents, all of its sectors, and really put forth some real action in terms of addressing this issue of drugs and crime and violence. And we want to start out with the chair of our coalition, Carolyn Dallas.
On behalf of the coalition, I'd really like to thank you for the effort that you've done in terms of recognizing that the work that the coalition has done. Being a coalition and trying to bring people together and trying to work on some of the particular issues that we work on is very difficult sometimes. And it's always wonderful to have someone, especially at your level, to continually recognize this. So by your continually talking about the Fitchburg area, I was down in Boston that day, and it was a wonderful day. I felt extremely proud to be associated with the coalition, and just the response and people coming up and talking to us and wanting to know how we were doing and how we made it work was quite exciting. So I think it was wonderful that we were singled out to participate in this. And now again, by getting the funds for the violence prevention grant, I think again shows the support that the state has in helping us to work on our problems. And as a coalition, we need this because so often it's so difficult to try to stay committed to some of these kind of issues and without the support that we have. So once again, thank you very much for supporting our coalition.
Thank you. Thanks for coming. Nice to see you both.
I've been here 15 minutes. Where's the check?
We're making you stay a little longer.
Yeah, I was going to say, you have another appointment, right?
I have a few things in the supplemental budget I want to talk to both of you about before we get through there. Okay.
Next, we have a gentleman I've known for probably about 22, 23 years, Joseph Carboni, captain of the Fitchburg Police Department.
1971, when I first started with the crime prevention efforts here in the city, which is some 20-odd years ago, I went to an 80-hour course out in Springfield. And after the course, I was raring to go. I got back to work, and my first assignment was to go out to businesses and houses and to advise people on how they could prevent crime from occurring to them. But I found out that it was a job that took 110% of my time, and it was impossible for me to perform. I needed help, and I needed funds, which were at that time impossible. So what was occurring throughout the country was that they were forming neighborhood watches. And even then, back in the 70s, the early 70s, it was very tough to keep a cohesive group together. They would meet 1 or 2 times, and it would last 6 or 7 months, sometimes up to maybe 1 year, and then the group would break up and we'd be back to the first base. So it was very difficult to keep these groups together. Recently, with the assistance and help of the Fitchburg Safe and Healthy Neighborhood Association, they've done a tremendous job in keeping the groups together and trying to organize the city. The police department, with priority calls that we have and the busyness that we have, it's impossible for me or anybody in the Fitchburg Police Department to give it 110%. So we appreciate the help from the citizens of course, the city of Fitchburg that are involved in these groups and the coalition itself. And I would like to thank them for that. I guess And to end it all, I would just like to say the old adage, you know, the best preparation for tomorrow is to work superbly well today. And I think the coalition deserves a well-deserved hand in regards to that. Thank you.
Can I ask you, just give an applause for that. I've heard Chief Gallant mentioned this, in fact, talked a little bit about this in Law Enforcement Coordinating Council down in the efforts and the work with the coalition. But do you try to, can you measure it in terms of the number of, sort of the crime prevention impact that you've seen on this has been helpful to you in not just organizing neighborhoods, but in terms of information and support for the efforts of the police department?
Yeah, we can. We have a computer set up where we can call up various crimes that occur in just particular areas in the neighborhood, and we can determine whether crime is either increased or decreased. And I have done it in the past, and I found out that when the neighborhood groups are together and stick together over a period of time, crime does decrease. Only for the reason that they call more, more suspicious type calls come in, and the police are in the area, of course, more often. But
If I could
there are statistics.
The coalition and neighborhood group below them have been very instrumental in helping the police. We just had a recent meeting on the Water Street Neighborhood Association, which is beginning, and they identified two problems. One was a house on Granite Street where they said, we all know drugs are taking place, we've seen it happen all day long, and we want something to happen. Just 3 days ago, there was a major assault, a major bust by the police department where they arrested 4 Dominican Republican nationals who were dealing heroin and cocaine. So that, I mean, again, that was part of working with the coalition and working with the neighborhood group, identifying the problem, and the police now taking that information and doing that. And that's happened in the Claiborne area and other areas. So I think what we're seeing is a closer working relationship between the community and the police and providing information, where in the past they've been hesitant to give information. At that meeting, nobody was shy about telling them where that property was and what was going on there.
Oh, that's very good. I mean, I just wanted to commend you for the work here. The thing that we're finding in a couple other communities is there are lots of, some of the neighborhood groups have never, part of the community policing argument is that you're getting police with the community much more, and the community is feeling much more comfortable giving them information. I mean, including complaints, which is part of it, but the other part is really identifying for them what the real problem is. In one neighborhood in Dorchester, what they really wanted, aside from the assaults, which were a problem, was there was one house that had really was being foreclosed. The bank had taken it over, but nobody had done anything on it. It had become a major source of drug dealing, they felt, and was really disrupting the whole tenor of the neighborhood. And they made it very clear that was, whatever else the priorities were, that was one that they wanted us all to focus on. It was very, very helpful to get that kind of input. And the success is that when they acted on that house, it also made a huge difference to the community as well. So thank you. I'm sorry.
Next we have Larry Casassa from the Office of the Planning Coordinator, who is also a resident of this neighborhood here.
Scarce federal resources that the city receives. One of those sources that, fortunately, because of a lot of support, communities throughout the country, that has continued to be funded at least a reasonable level over the years has been the Community Development Block Grant Program. And although each year we receive requests for funds for very worthwhile projects of 3 or 4 times the amount of funding we have available, I think in Fitchburg particularly, partly because of the wisdom of the mayor and city council, and also very much because of the fact that we have an unprecedented level of citizen participation in the city, we're able to invest those funds very wisely. And I guess I would just give testimony to some of the kinds of things that we've been able to fund or invest in Fitchburg through block grant that directly relate to the kinds of things we're trying to do here. I mean, we did fund the first Crime Watch program that was referenced several years ago in this neighborhood. And in addition to funding a lot of the infrastructure needs, the parks, the playgrounds, the sidewalks that give people a sense of hope that things can turn around, the mayor and city council have also used as much as we possibly can under block grant regulations to support public service activities, which includes both augmenting the enforcement efforts of the police department through drug enforcement, and also by providing some additional funding this past year for neighborhood patrols. that would allow some walking beats through the neighborhood. And of course, again, it's not nearly enough, and we just filed a recent grant in cooperation with Safe and Healthy and the police department for another $1.1 million in federal grant funds that we hope will result in an additional 3 or 4 officers, I believe, who can patrol this area. So there's an awful lot happening, and it isn't just on the enforcement end either. We're also supporting directly the neighborhood associations that the Safe and Healthy Neighborhood Coalition essentially make up. During this past year, the mayor awarded $15,000 to the various associations so that they will be able to propose small projects within their neighborhoods that they can use to promote whatever they feel that the most significant needs in the neighborhood are, from youth activities to possibly supporting crime watches and those kinds of activities. So we're really very pleased. And there is, by the way, under this House, one of the programs that block grant funds that also is related, and that Kumba, the Kumba program through Three Pyramids carries out. And that's a dropout prevention program for the schools that's been very successful over the years. So I guess the message is it's not enough. But we do use our resources very wisely in Fitchburg, and I think it's a testimony to the efforts of all the people who are here and all the associations that they represent.
I mean, I wondered if you had a sense, and I know what Jeff did, at the federal level, what I've heard a lot about from Justice Department and others is they're going to look at whether communities have sort of developed a coordinated approach involving all of the players as one sort of criteria in how they're going to funnel federal money. Do you have any sense about whether that's